G'day and welcome back to what I've been reading. Our opportunity to share with you some of the stuff that our analysts have been digesting, whether it's a book, a paper, whatever has taken their fancy. We want to share it with you. If you don't know, I'm Scott Phillips from The Motley Fool. I'm our Chief Investment Officer, and I'm joined today by rockstar analyst at The Motley Fool, Andrew Legget. Andrew, g'day.
Hey, Scott.
Mate, this is a fantastic, I'm going to put the old man glass on a second. This is a interesting book and a fantastic title, but even better subtitle. Money Men, a hot startup, a billion-dollar fraud, a fight for the truth. That sounds part racy thriller, part business book. Tell us about the book Money Men.
Yeah, so this is probably one of the craziest stories I've ever read
Right.
in this kind of genre that is business and investing. So I'll just, before I get into the story, I'll
Mm.
just talk about some of the cast and characters. So we have journalists, we have businessmen, we have a Singaporean whistleblower who lives with his mother. We have a family who lives in a rice field in rural Manila who were just busy grooming their pet poodle and had no idea that they were actually, part of this massive, what would be this massive business story. There's also the former head of the Libyan Foreign Intelligence Agency and a chief operating officer who vanished without a trace and to this day is still on the Interpol most wanted list.
Wow. Okay.
Like,
That's a hell of a cast to start with, and spanning the globe, mate. That's a remarkable range of characters.
yeah, and that's the crazy thing. So this is a story of, scandal, bravery, clandestine activities, intimidation, and as the title said, a search for truth. And the thing that struck me about this story is that as sensational it is, the most sensational part of it was that every bit of that story is true. Like,
Ah,
this is not a made up story. This happened in real life. So I'll just break down what the general story is now that I've kind of, teased it a little bit. So Money Men is written by an author named Dan McCrum, who was a journalist at the Financial Times. And he is the central character because he was the person who found himself in the middle of trying to break the story that was the fraud that happened at German payments company Wirecard. And it kind of, you know, like it's not your average kind of fraud story of just like, the smartest guys in the room with Enron and, things like that. This is it even the author himself, and I've watched, interviews with him afterwards after this book was released, and he's like, it just kept getting weirder and weirder and weirder. And it all started, funnily enough, with a chat with an Australian hedge fund manager who
right.
just said, "How would you like to hear about some German gangsters?" And it kind of just went on from there. But so Wirecard was this budding fintech company in Germany. It became a very big source of pride because it was like this brand new European tech giant that, Europe wanted a big tech business to, compare with the likes of what that was seeing in America. At one point, it had a market cap that was greater than Deutsche Bank,
Wow.
which is the largest German bank. In fact, in the dying days of the fraud, they tried to hide it by trying to actually acquire Deutsche Bank. So this is kind of just, like I said, this is a bonkers story.
Mm.
But the real story is not so much that the fraud happened, but what the Financial Times had to go through in order to, like, they kept releasing articles and they kept finding things. They would release it as the journalists should do. And then they kept getting all this blowback. There were people set up outside across the Thames from the Financial Times office with listening devices. People were getting, um, you know, thugs sent to their houses to try and intimidate them.
Mm.
The company itself set up stings to try and prove that the Financial Times was actually in cahoots with short sellers. It got to the point that even the German financial regulator decided to step in and stick up for Wirecard by banning short selling in Wirecard shares and suing the Financial Times for market manipulation.
Wow. There you go.
So that's like one of the most crazy things. Like the financial regulator who is there to protect the integrity of the markets was unwittingly brought in to protect the person that was actually committing the fraud against the person that was trying to kind of, you know, bring it to the
Expose it.
public's attention.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Tell us
I don't want
tell
to.
us about the fraud.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a bunch of different things that happened here, and this is also where it can kind of go into different areas, including Libya, of all places. But essentially, what one of the main things that Wirecard was doing was it's called round tripping. So they would take money and they would put it through a bunch of different subsidiaries and then transfer that to an external party who, more often than not, that's where these kind of, the people in rural Manila come in because someone had secretly registered their address as the headquarters of a, Asian payments company. And then they would send that money back to Wirecard, which then would make it look like that it was a legitimate transaction.
Mm.
So essentially, Wirecard was sending all this money around in a circle and they were getting it back. But through the way they were doing it, they were able to keep going, hey, look, we're growing revenue so fast. And eventually it all came crumbling down when the auditor decided to take a closer look and found that I think it was something like 1.87 billion euro that was meant to be sitting in a bank account in Asia didn't exist. It
Oh.
is it's an insane story.
Mm.
It's probably one of the most just interesting and crazy stories I've ever read. And the fact that this was all true is the craziest part of it.
Stranger still, exactly, exactly. I mean, yes, there's gonna be a movie made of this book at some point, surely.
Oh, there already is. There's a
Oh, yeah,
documentary on Netflix if you want to,
nice.
skip the book and the it's a lot more kind of condensed. I
Mm,
would encourage the book, but it's called Scandal.
right.
And it is on Netflix at the moment.
There you go. Money Men sounds like a fascinating story. I am curious, mate, what, if anything, did you learn from an investing perspective? What should, our viewers expect to find in the book?
Yeah, so of course, like, yes, this is a great read, but we also want to, get something for it that helps us become better investors. And there's a few different lessons that I picked up from this, and little things that I've now worked into my process to try and, protect myself from these type of things. The first is that, and this is something that I've read whenever I've read, books like this, whether it's Money Man, Smartest Guys in the Room, Bad Blood, which is the story on Theranos. Um, Investors like to talk about red flags and like looking for companies with high debt and all these things that are actually really obvious signs to not invest. But the biggest scandals in financial markets have all happened to companies that at one point were really, really hot companies.
Mm.
Like, and that's what these type of, financial frauds do. They play on psychology to get people excited. So when you look at these companies, they are not always obviously wrong. In fact, they're quite often going to be very celebrated companies on whatever stock exchange they might be on. And they're probably going to have some, you know, high end, well known investors, who have bought shares in them as well. And that leads to the second thing, which is when you invest and when you're trying to beat the market, you have to try to come up with a view that is different to the market and be right about it.
Yeah.
When you're like the Financial Times were on the money. They've as did all the other short sellers and all that were on Wirecard, looking at Wirecard at the time. But it wasn't easy for them. Not only did they actually have um, real intimidation and kind of stop signs to try and make it harder for them to do what they were doing.
Mm.
But just in general, people like this can't be right because this is a highly profitable, innovative, well-respected European tech company. So it kind of is a great example of the mindset I think an active investor needs to have, which is like, I don't think of myself as an analyst. I think of myself more of an investigator. So it's probably why I, I like stories like this. because I'm not so much about waiting for information to come to me, but to try and find information that helps me come up with a view that the market doesn't see. And that's what the Financial Times did, and that they went through hell, but they were right, and they got the story of a lifetime around. Uh, and the author got, at 1 minute he was getting sued by the German market regulator, and then he got the after this was all done, he got the highest prize for writers and journalists in Germany, because of his in uncovering this. And the final thing I will just kind of touch on, and this goes again, it's not just in Moneyman, but all the books that I've read, because I do try to read stories like this, and that's because investing well is about having both good offense and defense. Like, we love stories of, this person invested in this company and they made tons of money. Like, those are great stories, and it's like, oh, how can we learn to
Mm.
find the next version of, whatever hot company that made a ton. Amazon, is everyone's go-to because that's just been a juggernaut. But at the same time, you've also got to look at the defense and how can I protect myself from losing a lot of money? You're not going to stop yourself from losing money completely. That's just, if you're trying to beat the money, that's just never going to happen. But how do I stop myself from losing a lot of money that just really hammers my portfolio that I'm always end up needing to play catch up? And that's why reading books like this, I think, should also be high on the kind of reading list of investors as well. Because through this book, I found, and other books, I've found lots of little things. Whilst it's never been a kind of a checklist saying avoid this, avoid this, avoid this, I have picked up certain things that have allowed me to build better processes to protect myself from falling victim, hopefully, to these type of frauds and these type of scandals, and the type of companies that rocket rocket up and then just explode and investors lose everything. And that's kind of the main lessons that I take from this book. And the good thing is, these are captivate, like, not just Money Men, but the others in that genre. They're captivating stories. So once you get started reading, it's easy to kind of get through it. Unlike some other investing books where I, I struggle big time. So yeah, that's Money Men, and that's the lessons I've generally picked up from it.
Love it. Thank you, Andrew Legget. Money Man, a hot startup, $1 billion fraud, a fight for the truth. It's like a rollicking read. A couple of investing lessons to go with it. Mate, thank you for sharing your thoughts with me. Thank you for sharing it with our audience. Thanks for watching. If you are enjoying these videos, whether it's what I've been reading, our stock of the month, stocks in focus, live Q&As, we do plenty of stuff now on the YouTube channel. Make sure you do all the usual YouTubey things. Like the video if you liked it. Why? Because it's good for our egos. More importantly, it helps other people find the channel. And make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. Why? Because that way, when the next time something great comes out, whether it's a stock of the month, stocks in focus, what I've been reading, whatever we're doing on YouTube, you will be notified the second it's available, so you get more good stuff like Andrew's review of the book. Thanks for watching, and until next time, full on.